Well, I will call this session of our business
This
meeting.
conference will now be recorded.
I'll call our work session to order, 9 a.m. on Tuesday, October 5th. And I am Zan Ogerow, board chair. I want to acknowledge that we're on lands that belong historically to the Kalapuya and LC peoples that are still with us in the tribes and federations of the Grand Ronde and Select Indians, and that we seek to honor their vision about balance with natural limits and ecosystems here in the place where we live. Are there any, first further introductions? I pass it on to Nancy.
Good morning, Nancy Wise, Commissioner and Vice Chair.
Pat Malone, Commissioner.
Good morning, Joe Kirby, Benton County Administrator.
Van Sprony, County Council.
Alyssa Rash, Public Information Officer.
Greg Riddler, Benton County Sheriff's Office.
Bill Eminger, Benton County Environmental Health.
Jeff Van Arsdale, Benton County Sheriff.
Hi, April Holland, Benton County Public Health Administrator.
Okay, thank you for those introductions. I see that Brian Lee is with us from Emergency Management, as well as guests Sean Collins and Jennifer Butler. Thank you all for attending this morning. Are there any announcements? Okay, hearing none, are there any comments from the public?
Dan, could I comment?
Certainly, Jennifer. Welcome.
Thank you. Commissioners and county staff, thank you for your time this morning. A couple of weeks ago, I sent the county commissioners an email describing a recent camp clearing, during which many positive cases of COVID were discovered. Understandably, there has been some concern raised about how the location of that outbreak and number of positives spread throughout the community. The concerns regard presumably the safety and privacy of the people camping there, and while I recognize the importance of protecting health information, their safety and well-being has already been compromised by a system that failed to support them or provide them with the resources necessary to survive a global pandemic. The sharing of information was really a flag on the field, asking if and when the support structures will activate to provide the necessary support. We all know we're in a public health emergency, and more people are becoming houseless in our area by the day. The recommendations the CDC has put in place meant to prevent worsening this emergency are not being followed by the city of Corvallis. It is surprising to me that after a year and a half, we still have not made significant progress on the coordinated support needed for folks to isolate, particularly those isolating in tents. While I appreciate so much the work the county and the public health department are doing, I would ask for even greater clarity and encourage the commissioners to ask questions when presented with information. For example, what does it mean that Benton County Public Health is in collaboration with partners? Does it mean a robust, responsive partnership, or does it mean the 4 rooms that Unity Shelter has available for quarantine and isolation at 3rd Street Commons? Not nearly an adequate number. When it is reported that the harm reduction team is working with folks living outside, do you know how many people that represents? To my knowledge, that team is made of 2, maybe 3 staff. How many people are they attempting to serve? And how can they possibly provide the kind of resourcing and support needed during this crisis? When a school or a living facility or even a congregate shelter has an outbreak, they are supported with resources. Encampments are congregate shelters. They just don't have stick-built walls. Why are we ignoring the need to resource and support them during this desperate time? By not supporting them with routine testing, isolation possibilities, food, hygiene, and sanitation, we make it impossible for these folks to shelter in place and increase the risk for our entire community. How bad does it need to get to leverage the resources we need to take decent care of our citizens? The pandemic is clearly not over, and our systems are all strained. anything the county can do to encourage more effective communication on the status of efforts or more effective collaboration on best practices will be helpful as we continue to face this public health crisis. Thank you for your time and your good work.
Thank you, Reverend Butler. Appreciate your comments. We'll take them to heart. And are there any other comments from the public? Okay. We will now review and approve the agenda. We do have 2 additions to the agenda. We will have 2 executive sessions on the agenda. The first regarding labor negotiations under 192.6602D, and the second for real estate under 192.6602E of Oregon Revised Statutes. So, are there any other changes to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll consider it approved and move on into the work session with item 4.1, an update from our Department Operations Center. I did not see Suzanne, but I do see April online and Brian Lee as well. So, April.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, all. I have a lot to share with you today. It's not going to be a surprise to hear that our cases are still very high. We're at a high plateau right now, so as we hear news about the state bridging the top of the wave and coming down on the other side, we're still riding the top of our wave here. We had 183 cases reported last week and an average of 181 cases every week for the last 4 weeks. So why are our cases still so high here? And we're certainly not the only county facing this. But we could be seeing an extended peak of the Delta surge, increased congregating with K-12 school and university starting created opportunities for new chains of transmission. We do expect that cases are going to decrease to a low level, but the decrease is challenged by the high transmissibility of this variant and additional opportunities with many activities moving indoors. The low levels that modelers were hoping to see around Halloween may not come until the new year. Just for a little perspective, the total number of cases reported in June was 89, then in July was 220. August saw 658 cases. In September, the total was 750. Our corresponding case rates are also very high. We know our newer method of looking at community transmission involves a 7-day case rate where anything over 100 is considered high community transmission. Ours is 193. If, like me, you're still stuck in the 14-day case rate, to look at a little bit longer rate of time, that rate is 397. So just about at double where when we had the risk and protection framework, we'd be looking at extreme risk. So we continue to have very high rates of transmission in our community. Our positivity rate did surge downward last week to 3.1%. It had been around 7%, and that largely was due or contributed by OSU move-in testing. Either way, our positivity rate has been among the lowest in the state. And as you've heard me say before, a high volume of testing available is a good thing, as it allows us to detect cases and implement that isolation and quarantine that breaks the cycle of transmission and reduces the number of new cases. In terms of case representation, we're starting to see slightly disproportionate cases among children. And for example, those aged 12 to 17, they comprised 6.6% of cases in the last month, and that age group makes 6% of the population. So we're seeing a higher proportion of cases relative to what that age group comprises. And then kids 6 to 11 who, as we know, can't yet be vaccinated for COVID, made up 6.8% of the past month's cases, and they comprise 5% of our county population. So we are seeing a lot of activity in youth who can't yet be vaccinated. The other overrepresented age group is people aged 30 to 49 who had 27% of cases, and they're 22% of our population. Conversely, people 70 plus who have the highest rates of vaccination continue to have low relative rates of the share of cases. So more vaccination appears to be correlated to fewer cases, which makes a lot of sense. We continue to see a lot of outbreaks, and they are predominated right now by K through 12 schools. We've got several classrooms and school-related activities, sports activities, et cetera, involved in outbreaks. I will say that we were impressed by the move-in testing results from Oregon State University. Their classes started recently, and they tested about 2,000 campus residents, and the initial batch of results that I received had 13 return positive, so their vaccination requirements appear to be quite good for having 13 come back positive. That's many fewer than we'd expected. Just moving on to hospitalizations, hospitalizations remain high in many areas, but fortunately, they're decreasing statewide. Yesterday at our local hospital, we had 22 COVID inpatients, and our 7-day average has been 23 hospitalized COVID patients every day. So much higher than what we were seeing a couple of months ago, but coming down a bit from the average of around 27, 28 that we were just seeing a few weeks ago. Today's hospital census numbers show that there are 5 out of 100 staffed ICU beds available in our region. And again, our region serves about 800,000 people in Benton, Lincoln, Lynn, Marion, Polk, and Yamhill counties. And in terms of med-surg or non-ICU beds, there were 16 out of 647 available. This is, still shows a need for people to take care and avoid risky behaviors, and to continue COVID precautions. In terms of COVID-related deaths, unfortunately, right now about 2,000 people a day are dying from COVID, and the total number of U.S. deaths has exceeded 700,000. Here in Benton County, we did learn of 5 additional deaths in the month of September, which brought our total to 30 since the pandemic began. And then while the number of death reports in September in Benton County is higher than at any other point during the pandemic, including initial outbreaks we saw in early 2020, the actual dates of death were spread over a wider time frame. However, the overall rate of death in the last month, it was the highest than at any point during the pandemic. I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about vaccination because we've seen a lot of new information on this topic. Last Monday, boosters were approved for certain individuals who received a series of Pfizer vaccines. We had a recommendation from CDC that was adopted by OHA that people who were 65 and up and people who lived in long-term care facilities, if they received Pfizer previously and were 6 months out from that second dose, should get a Pfizer booster. Additionally, people who were 50 to 64 who have underlying conditions should get a booster if they meet those other qualifications as well, 6 months and Pfizer as the initial series. And then there are two groups that may get boosters should they choose to. So that's people 18 to 49 with underlying conditions, and people 18 to 64 who may be at increased risk for exposure due to their occupational or institutional setting. So that would include healthcare workers, teachers, frontline workers, etc. We've been doing a lot of planning around youth and booster vaccination as we continue our work to reduce gaps in vaccination rates for the initial series. Recently, we've specifically looked at local capacity and developed estimates of need for when this first booster came into play, as well as when we have Moderna and Johnson & Johnson boosters, as well as vaccination for 5 to 11-year-olds. It largely depends, the demand largely depends on what proportion of the eligible population will want to receive a booster. Samaritan initially planned, our partner Samaritan initially planned to help with 2 mass vaccination sites, one at the coast and one here in the valley. The valley site that they chose in Lynn County did experience some late notice availability issues and just had less capacity than initially planned. So we and Samaritan Health Services have been working on a vaccination plan together to meet the demand. Our first stop was with our colleagues at Oregon State University. And after navigating very far into the process, including touring a site and discussing pricing and organizational roles, it was determined by OSU that an on-campus site would not be feasible due to space and parking concerns. One thing that was stressed throughout is that resources remain very limited among all parties, and whatever we put together was not expected to be a research-style, large-scale clinic. What we needed is something medium-sized and to fill a temporary gap between supply and demand. And now I'm going to share with you what we are finding a week into Pfizer booster approval. The demand for boosters is very different from what we experienced when vaccination first became available. We are in frequent communications with Samaritan Health Services, and I'll share more information about our schedule of clinics in a moment. But Samaritan has absorbed boosters for its largely Pfizer-vaccinated workforce by providing internal clinics. We have partnered with pharmacies to provide booster vaccinations to long-term care facilities in the county. We're very proud of that, to be able to serve the long-term care facilities in a seamless way, and proud of our partners for doing that. Pharmacies, providers, and SamCare Express sites continue to provide vaccination and are currently operating within capacity. Our planning with Samaritan Health Services has shifted to a model that aims to fill upcoming gaps between supply and demand while meeting our Department Operations Center goals of providing outreach to underserved community members and reducing disparities in vaccination uptake. We're working with our partners, including Samaritan Mobile and OHA Mobile Unit, and utilizing our own equipment to implement a rotating schedule of clinics to include schools and a community location. We're in the process of developing a calendar of events and are excited to share it with you and the public. As to what we've been up to, specifically, we had 5 events at schools last week, and we delivered 347 doses of vaccine. The Oregon Health Authority mobile unit, who is providing vaccination, they didn't have the administrative approval to give boosters until Wednesday, so our own immunizations nurse, Cindy D'Angelillo, set up shop there and provided them until they got that administrative approval. We provided non-perishable food boxes and to all, and $100 gift cards to those who are getting first or second dose, or anywhere in the primary series of doses. Upcoming clinics include on this Friday, the 8th, our own Human Resources Department has arranged for a drive-through clinic for Benton County employees and their dependents. So they'll have flu vaccine for ages 7 plus, and COVID vaccine for ages 12 plus, and boosters for those who qualify. And that'll be at the Calapooya building, formerly known as the old Fiserv building at 4500 Research Way, and that'll be 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. On the next day, on the 9th, we'll provide COVID vaccination to all, including many of our unhoused community members at the Street Dogs and Cats Fair put on by the OSU Veterinary School. The week of the 18th through the 22nd, we have 6 clinics scheduled in Philomath, Alsea, in Corvallis High School, Crescent Valley High School, Monroe, and at College Hill School. There's also a set of clinics supported by the Lincoln Health Center scheduled at Garfield and Lincoln Elementary Schools in November and December. So we have a lot of vaccination happening in the community. We're looking at schools and a community center model because we know that schools are a really great place for people to convene. It's safe. It's a place where we can bring people in from around the community, and as children become eligible, it'll be fantastic to have this rotating model. I'll just repeat that I do not anticipate a need to stand up an emergency operations center for this, but I'll always say too that the option is not off the table. I will keep in touch with Brian Lee, and he knows we'll provide a 2-week notice if the guidance, capacity, etc., sees any significant changes. Finally, I'll leave you with a few pieces of news because it's just constantly coming out. We heard about a new antiviral drug on the market by the pharmaceutical company Merck. The antivirals are designed to block a virus from replicating. And this new virus, which is named after Thor's hammer, molnupiravir, was found in trials to reduce the risk of hospitalization and death by about 50%. So we'll see that Merck will be applying for an emergency use authorization for this antiviral drug. Also, in the past week, we redistributed a CDC health alert urging pregnant women to choose COVID vaccination, and for providers to encourage it, specifically due to the increased risk of severe illness, death, and pregnancy complications. Pregnant and recently pregnant people with COVID are at increased risk for severe illness when compared with non-pregnant people. And then finally, there are several meetings scheduled throughout this month with the CDC, FDA, and the ACIP, the Committee for Immunizations Practices, which will talk about Moderna boosters and vaccination for children aged 5 to 11. So we'll be listening intently to those and continue our planning and our estimates within our group and with our partners. That's what I have for our update today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Nancy.
Thank you. April, I thought of a question that I've not thought to ask before. When we talk about the positive cases reported, are those unduplicated numbers, or that's just the total number of positive cases?
That's a great question, Commissioner Wise. Those are not. Those are deduplicated, so those are individual cases. Anytime we receive a new batch of cases, those numbers are subject to some amount of shift. So we'll have people who are sent to Benton County Public Health that really belong to another county. Maybe there's a spelling error that makes it a duplicate, but best efforts are made to deduplicate.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
April, you talked about the 5 to 11-year-olds and depending on which news story, it seems like they may be eligible by the end of this month or next month. And you talked some about the readiness for that group, but would you maybe comment on when you think that age group will be eligible and how we're going to get geared up in Benton County?
Thank you, Commissioner Malone. Absolutely. So we are enthusiastic about the age group 5 to 11 being eligible for COVID vaccination. The meeting that I refer to is scheduled for October 26th. Of course, I can't say, and I think few probably could, whether or not we would have approval come from the CDC directly following that meeting, or if additional data or information or meetings would be scheduled after that time. Best case scenario, a couple days after the 26th, we could be ready to go. And in terms of preparation, outside of having a robust schedule of school-based clinic events, we've also been in close communications with our providers here in Benton County. And honestly, those partnerships from before the pandemic have really they've really come in handy throughout the pandemic. We have been in close communication to encourage them to have a plan ready, whether it's having their own internal clinics, going through their patient roles and getting interest from families, and to be prepared with orders of Pfizer through our Pfizer hub. So we're working on the pediatric side with provider offices and family practitioners. We're working on the pharmacy side, and then we're working on our outreach piece as well.
April, can you?
Thank you.
Sorry, Pat. Can you comment on the capacity for quarantine and isolation of our members of the unhoused community that have been diagnosed with COVID?
I will say that I appreciated Reverend Butler's comments, and the truth is that it's been a challenge from the start. We have had many possibilities sort of fall away from us with hoteling and other sheltering opportunities. We had contracts that were discontinued. COVID is barreling through our communities, and that includes our unhoused community. And the challenge goes to the challenges of being unhoused. As we all know, there are so many players and partners working to assist and solve these efforts. However, we all know it's not something that we can solve overnight. And so while we continue to utilize every space that is available, whether it's the hotel in Albany, whether it's the Budget Inn, whether it's some other source among those very small numbers of possibilities, we don't have the resources to provide an indoor space for everyone at this point.
And the bottleneck is both people capacity, physical space, but I'm assuming it's not funds per se.
It's not funds.
Thank you. I look forward to the report, to hearing more from Suzanne and Paul Bolana about the joint work being done under the HOPE board recommendations. So we'll just keep asking.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. Are there any other reports under this item? Brian, do you have anything to add?
I did not, no.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions for April? Okay, thank you, April, to you and your team for all that you do. And we will move on. Next item is a discussion of Environmental Health 2022 revised fee schedule. We have with us this morning Bill Enninger from Environmental Health. Welcome, Bill.
Good morning, Commissioners and everyone. What I have before you is our proposed fees for 2022. We've got a little bit new format here with how we're doing online meetings. So I'm open to suggestions as to what would be the easiest way to facilitate conversation. My initial plan is to kind of go through each tab on your agenda checklist and talk about those elements, but if you would prefer for me to do a different approach, I can certainly do that as well too.
That sounds fine to me. Any comments from fellow commissioners? No? Okay.
So looking at the first tab, it's Agenda 21-2005 that has the agenda. The next tab is the revised fee schedule checklist. And the first one that I want to talk about is the tab immediately under that, revised 2022 fees schedule, Exhibit A fee schedule. That document is our proposed fees for 2022, and you can see a comparison to 2021 fees. At this point, we're not asking for any fee increase. Any increase in costs is being absorbed by general fund money allocated to environmental health. The next tab, Exhibit B, fee justification, goes into a little bit more detail. First on the history. In 2019, fees were adjusted on average about 3%. In 2020, we asked for no fee adjustments in 2020. And then COVID hit. And in 2021, fees were adjusted 3%. But because of the pandemic and allocation of environmental health resources to the emergency operations centers and other COVID-related activities, we were only able to accomplish about 50% of our inspections. So when we adjusted fees in 2021, we also included a credit of 50% of any of the 2020 license on the 2021 license fee. So in conversations with a lot of managers and owners of restaurants, pools, spas, hotel, motels, all those bits and pieces that we regulate under environmental health, they were very appreciative of the fact that we recognized that everyone was struggling, and that really kind of took the edge off of some of our inspectors in going in and doing the inspection. So thank you very much for that 50% credit. From my seat, it did not go unnoticed by the food service industry and tourist industry, as well as pool and spa operators. Moving down, that fee justification sheet, we do limit the amount of administrative cost to no more than 15% of direct costs. And so there's a couple of calculations we do for a full cost recovery and a partial cost recovery model. And that partial cost recovery model is an adjustment so that we do not pass on any more than 15% of the administrative costs. in our fee setting. There are a couple of other fee adjustments. One was for benevolent restaurants, and we're proposing a reduced fee for them, as well as temporary restaurant licenses for benevolent organizations. Those we're proposing, I believe, a $41 administrative fee, but the cost for doing the inspections is absorbed by general fund money. Then there are a couple additional fees in the on-site program, major and minor repairs. They're proposed at 50% of full cost recovery on those. We've been doing it for quite a few years now, and that reduction, we believe, has really helped low-income homeowners who have failing septic systems to apply for septic repairs. Since we've been doing this program, last year we hit an all-time record with 145% increase over our baseline year for people applying for major or minor repair permits. And then we're also proposing a 50% reduction in mobile home personal and medical hardships for on-site programs. There are a few other fees that we're aligning ours with DEQ and for an annual report evaluation for $62. That eliminates a lot of confusion when DEQ sends out notices to counties that they directly cover versus ours. They go with the $62 fee, and for the small difference in fee, the administrative costs doesn't really warrant us charging our own separate fee. Oregon Department of Environmental Quality does charge a $100 surcharge for qualifying on-site permits. Many of those are for like new construction. Should DEQ change that fee, we would pass on any changes in our license fees as well. So that essentially concludes my overview of the fee justifications. Is there any questions on this piece of the presentation?
Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, not a question, but a comment. I really like the approach from last year and the 50% credit and showing that we recognize the dire situation that our restaurants were in and responded accordingly. I appreciate that kind of thoughtful approach, and you may get to this later, but with no fee increase for next year, would you anticipate some upward adjustments in the following year?
I would, yeah, that's correct. We've had a couple of years where we've been able to keep fees relatively flat. I would anticipate that we might see an increase next year. Of course, I'm trying to look into a crystal ball, and my crystal ball is far from perfect. But historically, we've been running around 3%, 5% annually. Some years a little more, some years a little less. What we made a strong commitment to the businesses that we regulate early on is that we would do incremental adjustments every year rather than waiting for multiple years and then maybe doing a major increase. And some counties, some state programs might not adjust fees every year. They might do it every 5 years or 10 years. And when those bills hit the regulated industry, it always comes with a lot of shock. If you haven't adjusted your fee incrementally each year, and after 10 years you get a 50% increase, I think anybody's eyebrows would raise. And so I think we've generally tried to hold true to that, to do incremental increases. And that was a big part of our conversation with the Food Service Advisory Committee when we met and reviewed fees in terms of, did we want to do a modest increase now, do a decrease, or keep fees flat? And the Food Service Advisory Committee felt very strongly that we should, since we didn't need to increase fees, that we should keep the fees flat for this coming year.
Okay, but I guess I would put a plug in for, as long as it's practical, to do modest, regular increases rather than the shocking increase. I'm pretty confident that I'm correct. Our costs go up some every year, and if we don't adjust the fees fairly regularly, then we get behind and have to do maybe a shocking increase. But I'm all in favor of keeping things flat this year, just to let our businesses see if they can get through another year.
Mm-hmm. And I think what really helps for us for 2022 in keeping the fees flat is the amount of general fund support that we are receiving. Without that, we would definitely have to be increasing fees.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, is that amount of general fund support gone up over the past few years? I don't know exactly what the trend is there.
I'd have to go back and look at our records on it, but I think it has gone up a little bit in the last year or so. Yeah, yes, it has.
Okay, we just need to be cognizant of that, and we also know that we're in the middle of labor negotiations, and so our costs are going to go up. Like Pat, I also am in favor of regular small fee increases rather than surprises. I am impressed that we can keep our fees flat, but I'm a little bit cautiously optimistic, put it that way. I do really appreciate the organized nature of your materials for this item. This is always a very complex agenda item. So thank you. It's also always interesting to look at the comparators and to see what sort of fees they charge, and knowing that everyone's licenses are a little bit different, and so it's not always apples to apples. Yes, thank you for all the background information. Commissioner Lyons, do you have any questions?
No, just thank you for all of the information. I really appreciate that.
Also, I do want to acknowledge, while we're on a fiscally related topic, that our new Chief Financial Officer, Rick Krager, has joined us. He joined us a little while ago, and I've been trying to figure out how to weave him into the conversation and introduce him. He will be joining us in the discussion for the ARPA dollars. So, welcome, Rick.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Great to be here. Great to see all of you. I'm sorry it's been a while since we last on, but I am so happy to be here now. So thanks so much for having me today, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Okay, so back to the business at hand with the environmental health fees. I'm assuming we need to move this to a regular business session agenda?
I believe so. That is correct.
I'll move to forward these items to our October 19th, 2021 meeting for approval.
Second.
All in favor, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And nice to see you, Bill.
Nice seeing you all again, and Thank you very much. We'll see you on the 19th.
Thanks, Bill.
Excellent.
Bye-bye.
Okay, now we are moving into item 4.3, the ARPA update and discussion about allocation of funds. And joining us are Mary Otley and Rick Prater and Jen Ambuel. So with that, I believe Jen is just now joining us. Yep. Mary, please go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning, Commissioners. I just sent you an updated spreadsheet. As you know, the funding just keeps changing, so I've added a couple of items, revenue and potential expenditures, so that you're on the same page we are today. Maybe later today it'll change, but today this is where we think we are. So you should receive an email, or you should have received an email here just shortly ago. What we'd like to do today is the Word document that I was also attached is kind of some questions we'd like to get answered as we go forward, and I don't know that we can answer them all today. And I talked to Joe earlier this morning, and we might be able to bring it into the goal setting next week as well. So I'm not looking for final decisions today, but these are kind of the things as we sat and worked on how we're going to roll this program out. We need a little direction we need a lot of direction, I guess, from the board. But and the big one is how much of the ARPA funds will be available for community organizations. And based on, I don't know if you want to go, let's look at the spreadsheet first, and then we can talk about if there's any questions about this spreadsheet and all the things that are going on it. Line 9 are the resources that we have that aren't really in the budget right now. The ARPA funds are in the budget, but we hadn't allocated them, so they're there. But a lot of these other funding came along after the budget was adopted. So line 9, you can see there's almost $13 million of funding that has come in, including the reserves. And then down the left-hand column are all the projects and potential costs that have arisen in the last 3 months. And so just so you have an idea of what's going on. And I've added, I think one of the things that got added was the seismic retrofit of the Crisis Respite Center. And so that's $1 million. And that's probably high, but I'm just putting some numbers in. We also included in the last week, the health clinics were notified that they received a grant to fund their data warehouse. And so I've moved the data warehouse out of ARPA funding and up into projects. So it's a matching grant. The project is $875,000. They're going to receive $615,000. So we have a match of $260,000. So that's on line 26. And then one of the items, as we were practicing Jen's presentation about the tool we're going to use yesterday with Rick and others, one of the things as we're looking at the administration of these ARPA funds is becoming, almost untenable, and we're all going, all right, who's going to do this? And we're all looking at each other, and so we would like to talk to you about possibly hiring somebody to administer this for the next 4 years. And so that's on line 28, just as a placeholder. So that's a conversation we'd like to have with you as well. And then one of the things, I don't have it on my list, is that as we were rolling out the CIP projects, we started to pull them apart and identify ones that we thought were ARPA funded. So again, one more time, I want to make sure you are all on board that we are going to use the ARPA funds. If you look at line 34, the website redesign, the ring topology, data center cooling, data warehouse won't be there, and then the service district infrastructure. We thought as we were going through the CIP process that those projects could be candidates for the ARPA funding as it's designed, not the discretionary funds, but we want to just check bases with you that you're good with us doing that so that I can tell the departments to go ahead and start those projects.
So is that your first question?
That's my first question.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Commissioner Malone.
Mary, the line 41 service district infrastructure, would you tell me what that means?
Sure. We did Gary Stockhoff and hired consultants to look at all of our county service districts to see what they would need to bring them up to operations. And so these are for, I think the bulk of it's Alsea and Alpine, and some at Hidden Valley. Cascade View doesn't need any upgrades, and neither does South Third. So those were the projected costs. We don't have exact costs yet, but that was ARPA specifically identified water and sewer services infrastructure. So we thought we could use this to help those small service districts because they don't have the capital, and we would be having to look for grants somewhere else.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Well, I can say that I'm very comfortable with the that 2.493 million figure for those ARPA-related projects that are by definition eligible. Yeah, there's nothing there that we haven't been talking about for quite a long time.
All right. We will also ask them, as we previewed Jen's tool, we are asking departments as well as community organizations to give us better project plans and some check-ins. So departments, we won't allow, until we have a good project plan, none of these funds will be distributed. We kind of have shadow, very, very minimal descriptions of what we're going to do with the money, even from our own departments. And then, and you can see over the little box that starts in column G is kind of a recap of the ARPA funding we have and what we've committed, which is the CIP projects, the new projects, which is column H, and then the allowed projects, which leaves, as we sit today, 8.2 million of the 18 million that hasn't been earmarked for something. And so that's, if all of those projects go through, that's kind of where we are right now. We don't, as we do the discretionary funding year over year, we won't know until January, February. If we had revenue losses, I'm pretty sure we'll have revenue losses again. I would assume it'll be around the $3 million as well, but I don't want to bet on that yet until we have those numbers in. So if we sit right today, I don't know how much we'll have for community organizations until we figure out what our discretionary revenues are. Unless we, there's funding to target. We can target anything that's in the ARPA allowed category as well for the community projects. But that's a conversation, we're looking for the board to give us some direction on what kind of projects you want to fund and what the criteria will be. And we'll give you that opportunity to weigh in on that. I don't know, Rick, do you have anything on that?
Sorry, Mary, just sitting here trying to still figure out my technology and find my mute button. So, no, I think Mary covered it very well. Again, just sort of getting acquainted with all of the projects yesterday. I think the one thing that, as Mary alluded to, that we spoke a lot about was and being familiar with these ARPA dollars and some of the complexities that come with it, just wanting to make sure that we are giving the right accountability and monitoring oversight for the commission, for the board, and wanting to be able to support the federal requirements as it's related to that. So that was the reason that we had thrown in some administrative dollars. Obviously, we want to be very prudent with the use of the dollars, and we will look to you in terms of guidance on what level of monitoring oversight you would wish to have. Obviously, the more you have, the more likely the more administration that you would need. But I think, overall, I think, again, Mary's laid out a really good plan as it relates to the various projects. I think it's just really getting direction from you now. I think the only other thing I would add is, and I know Mary will likely hit on this, is just the criterion. I think is going to be an important discussion to really help understand how we are going to put out the community dollars. We'll look again to your leadership and thoughts around those what kind of prioritization you want to make around that. So I think that's a really important discussion to have. And again, I know Mary will allude to that. But again, great work by Mary as well as Jen on all of this. And so yeah, I think that's it. Thanks, Mary.
And thank you. And then if you can go to the Word document, these are the directions as we roll this funding out is that we'll have conversations with you on whether, just the administration of it, whether we upfront the money or do we ask them to spend their own money first, and level of accountability, as Rick alluded to, is there will be less level of accountability if it's the discretionary funds, but if it's under the ARPA approved funding, then we are going to treat it like any other federal funds, so we'll have to follow all those rules. And then again, the timing, what's your vision of how we'll roll these funds out? Will we spread it out over the 4 years or half and half or whatever? That's just, and then when Jen shows you her tool, there is a place for priorities. And what we hope to do before the goal setting meeting is send out a survey monkey type to the commissioners to allow you guys to individually rank your priorities, and then we'll do some sort of summation for it and then come back and review that with you at the goal setting to kind of limit the back and forth conversation, at least to get the conversation started and see where the county wants to go. So that's kind of where we are right now, and Jen's been working for the last couple of weeks to bring online our tool that we're going to use for both this funding as well as our CIP funding in the future. It's a web-based tool that both the departments and outside agencies will be able to access and input their projects. And then in the data, and then it will be brought back, and there's actually a ranking tool that you'll see pieces of that. So if there's no questions about this, I'd like to turn it over to Jen to show you what we have, and you can, it's going to be a pretty high-level overview, but I think I'm real impressed with it, and I think it'll serve our needs going forward.
I would like to comment that I think that it's going to be important to hire a program administrator. This is a lot of money. I personally would like to approach it strategically and with transparency, so that we can be credible in the face of our communities here in Benton County, and of course before the federal government. I also know that we have been wanting to have a grants administrator for quite a long time, and part of my question to you all is, will this person likely have the bandwidth to handle some of that other grants work that I foresee continuing in the next 2 years at least, associated with COVID pandemic and other infrastructure legislation. Because if that's the case, this really gives us a leg up and a lot of learning opportunity for that new capacity.
And I agree with you. I think yes. I think initially get them started on this, and then bring in the other pieces as well. And then by the time the ARPA funding's done, then we'll have an established grant management program that we can carry on throughout the county. And this gives us a way to fund it for the first 2 biennia.
I think that's the most excellent idea. Commissioner Malone?
The 18 million, we've received half of that, is that correct? And we get the other half next May. Yeah,
and we've spent next to none of it right now.
Okay. Are you in touch with other counties, other entities? It seems like we shouldn't be doing this on our own.
Right. And one of the, I don't know if Johan's on the call, is I sat in on a diversity type call on distribution, and one of the first things they said is wait until this the infrastructure bill goes through, because there probably more than likely will be some duplication, and so we can pull some of these projects out because the infrastructure bill might take care of some of them as well. So that I did, you know, it was a really good session, and I'll be joining some of the other ones for a while. But that was the first thing I took, is everyone's saying, let's wait. And I think most counties and cities and everyone is waiting to see what that infrastructure bill brings as well. So.
I do know that there's going to be an Association of Oregon Counties session at the November conference down in Eugene. It's focused on ARPA dollars and how counties are spending. And we did hear yesterday that in our district meeting that Clackamas County has already spent or allocated a fair bit of money for different projects. And the ones that I'm hearing about are twofold. It's the housing and homelessness related area that's clearly eligible under ARPA dollars, and also water related strategic planning. So those are areas that I think that we're also interested in, but I have no qualms about the go slow approach at this point. So thank you.
And Commissioner,
I want to make sure we have the process right.
And Commissioner, if I may, I apologize to Commissioner Malone's question. I certainly applaud the idea and thoughts, and again, just still getting familiar with all of the various components here yet in day 3. But I think that the opportunity that there is to leverage with other counties, partners, again, like you said, Commissioner, that there is a lot of commonality in terms of goals, and if there are ways to leverage and partner with our sister counties, it seems like we could be able to make the money go further. Again, don't know the relationships and all the opportunities that may be out there, but certainly that seems like that would be a way to make the dollars go a little further.
I could provide one example there, and that is that we are party to a broadband action team that's comprised of Lynn, Lincoln, Lane, and Benton counties. And it sounds like our local Council of Governments is going to pick up the facilitation, probably, of that work. But I would expect the Council of Governments might at some point turn to us and ask us to chip in for some of the expenses. It depends on how much can be absorbed by their own economic development program. And personally, I want to make sure that we have the best plans in place for any broadband investments in the broader community before we spend anything, and that the private providers are all at that table, which is great. So there have been some very healthy discussions, and Adam Lortz is our lead there. So, but that's an example of something that is very much trans-boundary across, the counties, and want to make sure we factor it in.
Are there any other questions? Or are we going to let Jen do her show? Okay, Jen.
If someone could please make me presenter. Okay, let me get you guys situated. Mary taught me I can move the box now that I don't have everything all on one screen. So please feel free to interrupt me, because now you guys are all on the other screen and I'm going to be staring the other direction and won't see any hand movements most likely. So this is the program that we recently implemented via ClearGov. And as Mary had stated, this will hopefully be used not only for the ARPA, but for our capital improvement plan going forward. I did put in a project that would be considered possibly using ARPA funds for an example. So I could show you how quickly it is to get this project moved to our outward-facing transparency site that I'm going to show you, so you can see the link that we can put on our Benton County webpage for people to go and look and see what projects Benton County is currently working on, what the budgets are, what the current expenditures to date are. So you can just see a really quick overview. I am the editor, and so I can go in once projects have been submitted. Essentially, I click this little box and click the button that says to send to projects. It asks me if I would like to do so. I click confirm, and it is a little slow sometimes. Oh, no, fast today, that's great. So this tells us that it is on the project page. So from there, I am going to show you, I would click on projects, and I'm still on the back end. So this is the in-house side before we post to public pages. These are all the projects that I have entered as test projects just to get us going and started. So the Calapooya Building Phase 2 is the one that I had pre-entered for this demonstration. I am going to go in, I just toggle the switch to say it will be available to public for viewing. And then obviously the public would be on our website and not be clicking on this specific link, but this will show you what that site would look like for them to go in and view projects. And pop-up blocked. That's never happened before. Here we go. There we go. So then here is the outward facing page for Benton County. At the moment, I only have the one project that is visible, and the map shows you where that project is located, what the expenditures are, and then any current expenditures to date, just as a general overview without even clicking into the project. So as a member, if I'm perusing the website and I want to see what's going on with this project, I can just click it, and it will tell me what the project is. This is provided by the department when they made the request. Any supporting materials that we are requiring that they provide. In this case, let's see what happens. I haven't clicked on the link yet, so this is a first time one for me. And where's it going? Went to my other screen, one moment. As you can see, it's opened up the budget overview for the Calapooya building just based off information we have at this time. So they can go in and look at any supporting documentation that we've asked the outside agencies or the departments to provide, such as budget plans, project timelines, milestones, all the details on the project. It is required that they put in the project location, so when they go and enter it, you can see I put in the address of Research Way, and it just does a little pin mark for the location. And then here is our project budget. It shows you what the total expenditures are expected to be. It breaks it down by category. They can just highlight each little piece of the bar graph and tell you what the cost is estimated to be. There is a little drop down key that you can just click through to see what these categories are. And then it also provides information on what the funding sources are. So in this case, $220,000 would be the ask of the ARPA funding, and then the rest is other sources from the county. This project in particular isn't a very exciting one for showing expenditures over time, because it does show you the projected expenditures by the budget year. And in this case, it's all expected to be finished within 2021 and 2022. So we only have one dot instead of a lovely little graph if the expenditures were spent over a number of years. Also on this project and all the projects, they have the opportunity to submit questions or comments, and then we can set up whether those go to the finance side of the house or the project manager, and so then they can respond to any public-facing questions that they are asked. And then on some of the other projects I had entered, there's a little more information to see, because we can pick and choose certain items to request and to display. But but a commonality would be if there were any expenditures to date, there would be a label here that just says expenditures to date and the amount, and then an additional bar graph that shows those expenditures by type. And if you would like to see that, I can certainly go back and pick another project for you to look at. But if not, I can actually then move on and show you how easy it is to actually enter a project for our outside agencies. You want to do that? Okay. So I am going to go back.
I do see that people can just click on Facebook and Twitter and post some of those graphics. So that's interesting too.
Yeah, there's a lot of great features, and especially the graphic piece. I know we've kind of always had a push for some more visual items, and this does give us the opportunity to do that both internally and externally. Okay, so I'm going to go into the actual capital budgeting side here and go into our current active 21-23. As you can see here, we can set deadlines for when we take submissions, and so we'll cut them off. And also an important thing to note is if an outside agency wants to apply for ARPA funding, we will have on the webpage a link for them to contact me because I have to set them up an account. So not everybody can go on there willy-nilly and just start putting in random things. They do have to contact me so I can set them up and invite them to use the program. Let me switch to a requester. And then I would just add the caveat that yes, we will have to put together a little manual that goes side by side with this, because there are, as I'm going to show you, a couple instances that could be confusing or tricky simply because it is a capital software program and the request that I'm going to enter isn't really a typical capital expenditure request, and that box unfortunately is mandatory and we cannot get rid of it. So you will see that in a moment. So as the outside agency, I would just come in and click on the button that says Start a New Capital Request. At this time, the only forms that are available within the software are the ARPA ones. I've hidden all the other ones to make it less confusing, since we're not directly using it for the capital improvement side of the plan right now. So I'm going to go in and enter an ARPA other project. So it's not really a capital equipment project. It's really not an actual capital improvement project. So I'm going to say it falls under other. And you just continue. Okay, I'm going to do some cutting and pasting so we don't have to watch me type. But at this point, the agency would just go in and enter what they want their project title to be. On this drop-down list here, I've placed at the top, they would select the Department of Outside Agency. Rather than having to scroll through all the lists of Benton County departments, I've requested that this just go at the top for ease of use. And then this is the portion that Mary did allude to earlier in this conversation, is at this moment, there are 15 options for the outside agencies to choose from. We will be sending to you these items via SurveyMonkey, and we're hoping that we can possibly combine or narrow down to about 5 to 8 choices. And then we are also going to want to discuss with you maybe what of those 5 to 8 choices, what are maybe the top 3 that are the highest priority to the board. And I will explain why when we get to a different piece. But so just be aware we are going to be sending that to you, and helping us narrow it down will greatly help working on the ranking tool side and waiting through all the projects that hopefully we'll get. So for this project, I'm just going to say that I'm a small business and nonprofit support. They have to put in a description, so here is, if it'll paste, my sample description that they are creating a revolving loan fund for economic development. And then we have also entered, and this, the best part I think about ClearGov is a lot of these forms are, we have the ability to customize them. So I have gone in and added, at the request of Mary, what's the impact on the vulnerable population. And so that way you can start looking at projects and saying, okay, these 6 impact those groups of people, these 8 don't. So maybe we look at these 6 more intensely than we would the other 8. Unfortunately, this project does not have any impact to that group, so I would just put something in there saying there is no impact. I'm going to pick some start and end dates for this project. We didn't mark this mandatory. We could if you wanted. We do have the ability to upload images. So I can go in here and say, oh, that's not open. So I will drag it from over here. So we can add the images to projects, and all of our projects do have that capability. So you can also use images for milestones if we would like. And then we have requested and set mandatory that they add detailed project plans, budgets, and the like. So for the sake of this, I'm just going to put in a sample project plan that I borrowed from the internet. Okay, and so here up next is the section I said can get a little confusing because this project isn't directly a capital expenditure project. Unfortunately, due to this being capital software, I cannot delete this box or hide this box. And unfortunately, you cannot enter a 0 in this box and have it submit. So we do have a little note here. It says do not use, enter a 1 in fiscal year 2022. So that will let this form say that you've completed it. And so we just do that. And then in this case, when I set up this project, I am going to enter in that the operational costs of this are going to be $4 million over 2 years. And then I am of this going to request the contribution of $1 million each year from the county's ARPA fund, and then we will be using $1 million of our own agency's fund to set up this loan account. So it will be important for them to make sure that the costs and the funding sources do balance. And then my address was 50. And it'll just put that little pin in there for us saying that's where our project is located. All that has been entered. They would just hit the back button to go to all requests. As you can see, here's the project that I just entered. They would click the box and hit submit. It asks them, are you sure you want to submit the project? They would say yes. And if a form was not filled out, it would kick it out to them saying you missed a mandatory field. It will also tell you it has been submitted. This one does tend to take a little longer than the project pages. There we go. It says it has been submitted, and it will send an email letting us know that the project request is in. So we could just click OK. I'm going to go back to the editor side. And as you can see, the project is right here. And it provides us all the details that they have entered. As you can see, here's the weird issue with the capital budget. That's how we will know it is one of the ARPA other projects and disregard that $1. But it does show you then the funding sources that they are requesting to use on the project, and then what the operational costs are, and the project location. And then there's the picture of what they're going to refurbish with this loan fund. And I'm going to go back to the dashboard for a moment. And so currently there's only one ARPA request in this scenario. It doesn't include that till I build it in. Before I take a moment to talk about scorecards, are there any questions or comments at this point? Because that's a lot of information to process.
Jen, is this just for CIP projects? And along with that, is this how departments would submit requests to get on the CIP budget?
Yes, sir. That is definitely how we are looking to do it. We will be inviting department heads to be able to log into the software, and they can add, they can choose to add sub-enterers, so that way we limit the number of people who are entering the projects. But yes, we will be using this for improvement and building that plan. It's a lot more in-depth, and we will certainly go over this again anytime when we're ready to work on just the capital side of the house. Unfortunately, the one downfall is we can't create two plans within the same year. So I have gone in and entered all the 21-23 capital projects myself, so that's why you're going to see that there are over 60 requests in here. And at this time, I'm just hiding them out of view so that we can use this tool to focus on ARPA.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jen, this looks like a very powerful tool that serves multiple purposes, both internal tracking and ability to compare projects, rank them, and to communicate to both internally and externally. I am glad we are pursuing this approach. I think it's great and has a lot of potential. I'm sure there will be bumps along the way. I've interacted with some other software used for grant making. None of them are perfect, but this looks like it does what we need it to.
It does. Like you said, there are some bumps and some small things. Us being a biennial budgeting system, when we work on the capital improvement plan, they have a great tool that unfortunately doesn't fit 100% for us because you can only view 1 year at a time. I did make a suggestion to the company via their website that maybe you have a drop-down option that we can see the 2 years on one page versus having to flip between them. So hopefully someday down the road they'll fix that piece. But I think once you guys get in here and you are able to see it and all the things that it can do, I think you are right, Commissioner. It's a great tool for us to use.
I'm excited about it. Thank you.
You are welcome. Any other questions really quickly before I move on to a very, very brief piece on the scorecard? Okay. Within the software, there are actually two things that we could look at. One is the departments will have the ability to rank their projects. So I can, let me see if it will let me do it in here. Like I said, I don't know all the ins and outs yet. No. There is, when doing it, oh, I have to be a requester. I'm not going to go back right now. There is an option that they can just drag and drop on the right-hand side. They just drag their projects over and rank them in order of what's priority 1, 2, and 3. So then the backside of the house can see, okay, financial services has requested 6 projects, and these 3 are the top 3 if we're only having the ability to give them so many projects and so much funding. So that's a really great tool that we have in here. And then the other piece would be the scorecard settings. Within this, these bottom 3 that are in here are just examples that were provided by ClearGov. Financial services staff did meet, and we did create one category for a scorecard, and that's just stating that did the requester choose one of the BOC priority ARPA categories. And so I had briefly mentioned that then when we do those eligible funding categories and request that you narrow them down to 5 or 8, and then provide what are your top 3. So any project that, picks those top 3 categories is going to get a higher ranking on the point scale, whether we choose a 5-point scale or a 10-point scale. And then you guys can also, we can weight them. So let's just say the category chosen is definitely the highest priority for the board. We can weight that the highest. And so we will have the opportunity then on the backside of the house to rank all those projects. One thing with the survey that we are going to give you, and once we get those results back, we intend within financial services to meet and provide some sample criteria for the board to look at and see if those are the criteria you would like to move forward with. And then we can create this scale. So that would be another great tool going forward. We will also be using that for the CIP. The one issue that we are going to have is we are still going to have to create an Excel model of this scorecard setting for each member to rank the projects, because we can only input one score into the system. So that way we will still, aggregate all the results and then be able to put that into the system for record keeping purposes and ranking purposes. And so that is my very, very high level, really quick overview of some of the things that ClearGov is going to be able to do for us. I am open to any questions, or if Mary wants to take over and sum everything up, I don't know.
We'll go with questions.
I see that Commissioner Weiss has a question.
Thank you. Jen, at what point does a project move to being displayed or accessible through the county's website?
We have discussed only putting approved projects up on the website, and then all it is once those are all been approved and pushed out, I just have to toggle the switch and it would go live.
Okay, that's great. I just want to say that I think that this is great. It's fantastic. I am very impressed. The graphics are great. It looks like it's easy to use, intuitive. The fact that the public is going to be able to access it on our website is, everything that I would hope for. I think this is a great example of transparency and, being open to the public accessing what they want to access. So thank you very much.
You are welcome, and I would definitely agree with you, Commissioner Wise, on the transparency piece. Plus, we didn't really get into it, but it's very, very easy to update. So whomever may be in charge of updating the projects, all they have to do is go into the project, do a quick manual entry of what the expenditures are by category, generate that graph, and it pushes it back out.
Commissioner Malone?
Yeah, Jan, I would second the notion that this is a real improvement in being on the CIP committee, and I had some concerns about our the way we went about ranking and setting priorities, and this seems like a great tool to help that process along. So, and you moved through the example project without missing a beat, so it seems like it's a usable program.
I think so. That would definitely be when Mary and I had watched the demonstration. User friendliness is definitely a big component, especially when we're using this for outside agencies and not having the ability to train them one-on-one other than a PDF document, or the ability obviously for them to call in and seek assistance if they need it. But like you said, it's pretty user friendly and you can move through it pretty quickly if you have all your materials ahead of time.
So Jen, there's no kind of a help button anywhere that users can access?
We can, I believe, put a link to a little training video that ClearGov has, but we are definitely going to have to do some creating of help documents and things like that we can place on our website with it.
That makes sense, and to explain how we're using it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there's some software that can handle multiple scorers and do that aggregation internally. I would hope that maybe at some point ClearGov would add that facility, but because it seems like a shame to have to do that in a parallel spreadsheet.
Yeah, that is one thing we didn't quite realize until I actually got in here, and no, it only is one ranking score, but we'll make it work. And as long as, we are using the same criteria and the same weighting process, it won't be that bad.
Agreed. It's just hopefully they'll get that, because I suspect there will be others using it this way as well.
I can also make that suggestion along with my other one.
Okay, well, I'm impressed. I'm excited. It's clear you all have been busy, and look forward to continuing those discussions about priorities and about how to weight some of the different criteria. Pat?
Yeah, just occurred to me, and I don't know how much effort it would be, but I'd be interested in what kind of a practice setting priorities with our current CIP budget, and just see how before we actually use this process for real, practice on something we've already done and see how it see how the rankings come out. If it's not too big a job.
It shouldn't be. Like I said, all of the projects, let me go back in here for a second. All of the projects are in here. So if I were to go and open this, now we're getting more in depth, but all of the projects are in here that we could go in and rank them, and the only difference is then we would have to set some criteria that I would end up deleting when we go to ARPA, because what's going to happen is we're going to have ARPA criteria that are X, Y, and Z. Whether or not those remain the criteria that we use going forward for CIP, it doesn't have to be, since ARPA is pretty much going to be only within this biennium in terms of ranking the projects and such. We can create new scorecards for the upcoming CIP cycle, but I would be more than willing to sit down with anyone, Commissioner Malone, if you want to go through and take a crack at what the ranking would look like. I can certainly set it up so you could do that. We would just need to come up with some initial criteria. And then I would also say one feature that you didn't get to see because I hit all the other forms, because it was very overwhelming when you're going through and trying to pick what form to use. I hid all the non-ARPA forms, and they do look different. So they're currently archived, but I would like you to see really quickly. If I were to go in, and this is just behind the scenes of an editing of the forms, we have created for the standard CIP panels for the core values and the current BOC priorities and county goals. One other suggestion I do need to make is to ClearGov is they can only pick one. So they're going to have to, when they're entering their project, maybe it fits, 5 of the 6 choices. I would highly recommend that we have our departments put that in the description, but to go through the process, they're only going to be able to put in one core value and one priority. So that side looks a little different because we are customizing these forms to each particular need at this point. So just so you know, we are addressing those values on the capital improvement side as well.
So, Jen, as I understand it, this portal can handle multiple forms to address different funding streams. But what it doesn't do is that the scoring piece of it does not allow you to tailor it to multiple funding streams.
All it does is it allows each project to only have one score. So, yeah.
So that would be another thing that would be wonderful if, ClearGov can do is acknowledge the fact that there are different funding streams and they have different scoring criteria because they come from different funders.
Right. So, luckily, in most cases, we aren't going to run into this, but this is definitely the trial by fire. We discovered that, I'm going to have to go in and change the scorecards as we need it, and we're just going to have to make sure that we retain a really good record of what we used for those initial scoring.
Yep, and I can see, as you introduce the complexities of why we need a dedicated program administrator that can keep track of all of it and not be doing it for a couple of weeks and then not go back to it for 6 weeks. That is a recipe for challenges.
Yes, it is.
One of the other, I just thought, as we're talking about this, is who will be reviewing the funding request. So we need to that list, number 5 is the review process. So that's another question we'll talk to you about next week as well. Is do we want to appoint a committee to review the requests when they come in?
That's a good point. And we had talked about potential role for the community members of our budget committee. We had also talked about perhaps a broader committee that might include them but include others. So yeah, that's a good question. And then I would assume that even there, that's a good point of discussion.
So within the next day or two, you'll see this survey to get a handle on some of your priorities, and then an update on these questions. So if you've come up with any questions in the next day or so, I can add it to the list so that it's all in one place. But look for us again next week on goal setting. And do you have any other questions about any of the ARPA things?
Not at this time. I'm pleased that we're making progress.
Yeah, thanks to Jen. Jen, it was kind of like, here, Jen, she and I looked at it and said, okay, this looks really good. And then it was like, all right, then make it work. And so she's been working, for the last couple of weeks to bring it to, and I thank her very much for doing that.
You're welcome. It's actually been pretty fun.
Excellent. Okay, any other closing comments from either Rick or Joe, Mary? Okay, then I propose that we take a break until 10:45. When we will address our agenda item 4.4. Thank you, Finance team, for the presentation. Colleagues back, we will begin again. And I did notice that Mitch Hine is with us as well this morning from DLR.
Yep, I will acknowledge Mitch and Melissa as well.
Good morning. Present.
Morning, Sheriff. Commissioner Malone, are you ready for us to begin? Okay. I see that Administrator Kirby is still with us, but I am assuming he's probably multitasking, so he'll join us as soon as he can. And with that, please take it away, Nick.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners and County Administrator. I do have with me today Mitch Hine from DLR, who was instrumental in creating the spreadsheet that I shared with you on Friday and that I'll be pulling up here on the screen shortly, and as well Alyssa Rash, who wants to talk with you a little bit about our meeting on large public meeting number 2 on 10/13, which is tangentially related to our site discussion this morning. Let me just check and make sure I just want to remind everybody why we're here and again review our timeline. So last week we had our initial discussion on the 2 proposed suburban sites south and west. Today is a continuation of that discussion, and we're hoping to leave this meeting with kind of a draft or at least a leaning towards one of the sites. I mentioned the public meeting on 10/13. We would like to come to that meeting and have some information to share with the public relative to our site discussions to date, and then hopefully our plan is to make a final decision on 10/19, so 5 days, the Tuesday after the second large public meeting. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa real quickly so that she can talk to you about the public meeting and how it relates to this discussion and your involvement, potential involvement. So take it away, Alyssa.
Thank you, Nick. Good morning, Commissioners, and good morning to everyone joining us. For those that don't know me, my name is Alyssa Rash. I'm the Benton County Public Information Officer, and I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. Commissioners, based on the interest that you have expressed in being involved in the public engagement for the Justice System Improvement Program, I have a proposal for you regarding our October 13th meeting and your involvement in it. And that would be that we provide an overview of the Board of Commissioners' top 5 criteria for site selection, and then we allow a short period of time for each of the commissioners to speak on the criteria. And so my question to you this morning is whether or not you think that is the appropriate step for this meeting, and also if each of you are interested, in providing maybe a 3-ish minute testimony on this specific topic.
Commissioner Malone, Weiss?
I think that sounds. I think that sounds great, and I can keep mine to 2 minutes.
Yeah, same comment. I would be glad to do a very short presentation with help.
I'll be happy to assist.
I think that's a good idea, Alyssa.
Wonderful. With that knowledge, I will move forward in drafting a slide with information about your criteria, and I will send it to each of you for review when I have that ready. Thank you so much. Nick, I'll hand it back to you.
All right. So thank you, Alyssa. And just so everyone's on the same page, actually, Ops team is going to be having a detailed discussion on the large public meeting and framework this afternoon. And I apologize that we couldn't have had this discussion sooner or later. We're kind of in that mode right now where we are keeping up. And so things are coming pretty fast and furious at this point. But glad that you're interested in participating. That works into the draft framework nicely, and we will provide more details on the meeting after Ops team today. So with that, I'm going to transition to the discussion and share my screen, and I'm going to start by sharing comments from the Technical Advisory Committee and Community Advisory Committee, because that was something you were interested in. And I went and culled through notes and came up with the following, which earth-shattering, but it does confirm a lot of things that we have heard. And I think it's important to note that when much of our site discussions with these two committees initially were focused on the south site and the north site, and of course the north site eventually we had to walk away from. But then we did, shift to the current west site, and it was included in in these notes. So we had overlap, but I also want to point out that relative to the Community Advisory Committee, while we did absolutely discuss the sites and look at pros and cons, there was also a need for confidentiality there. And so some of the discussions were kind of at a higher level initially until we'd gotten further along with the prospective owners. But with all that said, certainly here are the highlights. I mean, there was strong consideration for the importance of courthouse and DA adjacency. That really isn't site specific. Neither of the first two bullets really are. And also operational efficiency of a campus, and of course either site can support either of these considerations, which is good. Concerns from neighborhoods in proximity were noted for both sites as possibilities, and certainly that has sort of borne out in our public engagement process. Accessibility to public transportation was, immediately a discussion point. And of course, we've looked into that a little bit. Both sites are, proximate to current public transportation routes, but not on public transportation routes, so that has to be augmented. West area traffic came up, and then also, CPD or Dallas Police Department's interest in being in or near the core downtown area. So reminding you that originally we were talking about potentially having a new law enforcement building to accommodate both CPD and DCSO, and so that was the context of that discussion point. We're pursuing a bit of a different strategy now, of course, with the county potentially creating its own facility and maybe turning over the law enforcement building to CPD. So those are the comments. Let me just stop there and ask if there's any questions. Otherwise, I will transition to the spreadsheet. Okay. So I think I'll invite Mitch to just say a few words about this spreadsheet. I did give a summary overview of how it was created and why in my email to you, but if you would, Mitch, just kind of review how you and I arrived at this and what, your rubric was and what we're looking at here, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So last week, Commissioner Malone, you were asking for us to update the matrix with some of the information we've gained over the last year. The original one was a little over a year old. What Nick had was actually kind of a running list of all of those updated criteria. So we took that pro and con list and removed anything that was the same between the two sites in an effort to get it down to purely just differences between the two sites to help make a decision. The other thing we removed were some line items that had cost implications that were already incorporated into the development cost, such as wetland mitigation present on site. Something like that shouldn't be counted because it's already counted in the development cost. That alone reduces the criteria down to this. We also added some of the other nuances that we were mentioning that have been mentioned in some of the discussions, such as sheriff's access to the county, sheriff's access during flood events. Those are separate things, and so they're tracked differently. So that gets added to this list. So this is just a pro and con list where we're counting up the pros, and that's how we get to what we have here. And the four that are highlighted green are what was discussed as priority criteria. You have the ability to increase the weight of those importance for those criteria. So that's the quick summary of this.
Thank you, Mitch. And Mitch, I think you may have played around with those weights. Does it affect the outcome in favor of one side or the other?
It doesn't. If it's unweighted, one still comes out ahead. If you weight them, it continues to pull out ahead of the other.
Okay, thank you. Hey, I also want to add that something I mentioned in the email to you on Friday, that of course our public engagement process didn't explicitly ask the public what it thought about the two sites. But even if we had explicitly asked, it really wouldn't have changed this matrix either, because both sites, as we know, have communities in proximity. Grand Oaks, 297 houses. Willamette Landing, 479 houses. And both of those owners associations have expressed concerns about the siting of justice system facilities. One is closer than the other, but at the end of the day, they both, have concerns, and so it would have been one of those items that we dismissed for being the same relative to both anyway.
I have a quick question. Could you explain what node/anchor tenant potential means?
Sure. Yeah. So relative to the south site, you have a high development cost hurdle to effectively use that parcel, and it takes a sizable project to be able to absorb and justify those costs, and in so doing provide the opportunity for further development on that site. And so, in discussions that the county had with the city, they were looking at the county's proposed project favorably, because we would absorb and create infrastructure that really supported bigger, grander development plans for Corvallis, i.e. the extension of Tiger Island and looping that into 53rd, the possibility for other commercial businesses on those 65 acres. And so that's what is meant by that particular line item. The same argument really can't be made for the west location.
And Nick, that's because of lack of acreage on the west side compared to the south side?
Yeah, a sheer lack of opportunity, but also, the city of Corvallis views that Tiger Island 99 intersection as one of their gateway locations to the city, and so their transportation system plans support that. They don't have that same vision for Reservoir Road, so that's also a differentiator or limiter.
The other big difference is the fact that the west side is adjacent to so much OSU ag land, and there just isn't as much developable land in that area, broadly speaking.
That's a good point. So the intent here was to boil this down and make it as simple as possible. I hope we've achieved that. I'm here to answer questions, as is Mitch, but really at this point, I would open up the floor to you and for discussion on the two sites, and with the idea that we're trying to walk away with a sense of which site is favored.
So can I just jump in and say, I don't mean to throw a wrench in the process or anything, but I've said all along that it's important to me to not make a decision until all of our public input process has been gone through. I understand where you're coming from with wanting to run it by people at the next meeting. However, I still think it's important for me to not give a decision or a leaning yet. But I do think it could be appropriate to share this information or this kind of similar information with the public to show them, what we are looking at and what we're basing our decisions on. But that's just me as one commissioner, and my other two commissioners might feel differently.
Thanks, Commissioner Wise. Commissioner Malone?
Yeah, early in the process, I was thrilled with the south site and the amount of acreage, and then that darn reality starts coming in, and the development costs, I think, really impact the overall cost of the whole project, and I think it's really important that when we do finally go out to ask for money, that it's as reasonable a figure as we can come up with, and the south side really hurts that effort. So I'm fine with another public meeting, but if the information that you've given us is correct and kind of goes along with what I've received, and is the people that are in the vicinity of the south side think the west side is just a great place to do this, and vice versa. So I'm not sure that we're going to get a whole lot of different information with another meeting. But I look forward to it. I wouldn't mind being wrong on this, and that the people that come to the meeting on the 13th come away with a stronger leaning than what we've had so far. But when the development costs are 10 times more on one site than the other, and that between ODOT and the city of Corvallis that we're kind of at their mercy as far as what's required, but which is, I guess, why it's a $5 million difference between the low and the high. But anyway, I appreciate Mitch's effort on this and simplifying it, and gives us a good roadmap to keep getting information. But I appreciate this update from June 2020, much more complicated criteria form. So, and I think this is also more user-friendly and will help get community input.
I'm going to jump in and muddy the waters a little bit. I tend to agree with you, Commissioner Malone, that we're not going to get a lot more public input that will make this decision any easier. And we certainly can present just this scoring and be neutral about it and ask for input and use it to help inform our decisions. But I think we also have some big decisions to grapple with. From the standpoint of immediate need, the west site, to me, is apparently the better site from both a cost perspective and the location perspective with respect to access for the sheriff's office and emergency services to the rest of the county. From the long-term strategic perspective for Corvallis and Benton County, it's possible that the south side is better from the perspective of offering that development node to Corvallis, especially with the South Corvallis Urban Renewal District, and with respect to the fact that it is potentially useful to the county and potentially to the city for other public services on that 65-acre parcel. We do also have some decisions to make about how we want to address the wetland features of that site and how much we might want to set aside in future for park or other kinds of conservation purposes, and not think about utilizing the whole 65 acres if we were to acquire that parcel. So it's a complex decision, but I think we should be thinking about it strategically and not just from the short-term perspective. And that's where I struggle, because from the immediate perspective in terms of cost, the west side appeals more. Cost and efficiency for the sheriff's office. I have one more caveat to throw in. If the federal infrastructure bill becomes a reality soon, and I think it will become a reality soon enough for us to calculate it into these equations, would that not offer some opportunity for us to buy down some of those development costs with respect to the south site?
If you're asking me, Commissioner, I don't know the answer to that. I don't have any information on whether that would happen or not. I do know we have applied for monies for the 53rd Street overpass, but there hasn't been any discussion to my knowledge relative to allocations and the proposed improvements on the south side.
And you raise another point, that the 53rd Street improvements are something that we've been discussing for a while, and the residents of that part of city and county are concerned about the 53rd Street corridor. So to not include some of those expenses, even though they're not mandatory as part of this development, to me seems like a little bit of a artificial cost differential here.
I just wanted to follow up real quick, Nick, and you may have mentioned it at the beginning of the presentation, and I was absent for about the first 5 minutes of the conversation. But we do have the traffic impact analysis that's in the process of being conducted for the west site, and I do think that that information is forthcoming more so during the middle of October. That might provide us more insight regarding impacts to 53rd, also acknowledging at the same time the Mary's annexation impacts, as well as the overpass project that we've had on the books for quite a few years now. And the last meeting that we held, public meeting we held on that particular project regarding the overpass was back in 2017. I think this federal infrastructure package could provide some needed assistance relative to the 53rd corridor, but I would say it's uncertain at this point that it is possible. And I think that would apply to your south side as well, potentially.
One difference in the sites and the development costs is the south site is City of Corvallis rules and ODOT, and the 53rd, I believe, is our under our control as far as timetable and if it's included or when it's included. So to me, that's a difference.
Yeah, so I guess I would ask the true Pat, I guess I would ask the commissioners, and Mitch, help me out here. I don't recall that long-term strategic value was ever a selection criterion. I'm not judging it whether it should or shouldn't be. I'm just saying I don't believe it was. Mitch, do you have any insight on that?
Only that we've talked about the ability for the buildings and the program of the JSIP itself to expand on its own site. The ability for other county facilities in the future hasn't been a formal criteria up until this point, until what we're looking at here, which is potential for future expansion other than JSIP. So both of the sites do have, can accommodate expansion for the programs we're talking about in the JSIP project, and also the south site would of course have additional acreages for other county stuff in the future. That is counted here. Yes, 1 point for that. So it's not something that was part of the original criteria. It does make it into this updated one.
Sure.
Yeah, and the node anchor tenant potential captures some of the other long-term strategic. So it's in here. It just, the sites are different.
They are. I just, yeah, I want to make sure we're aligned on what's important and what we're presenting to the public as well. I guess the other question I have is related to, infrastructure, what would I call it? Infrastructure challenges that predated JSIP and yet are impactful, I guess I would say. And so there was a comment to Commissioner Ogerow that it is, it's artificial not to include the 53rd Street shortcomings or challenges in this analysis. I honestly, I don't know that we've looked at other similar shortcomings with the south side. It's really not, it's not something that we've formally discussed, and so maybe some direction there would be helpful.
Well, I I guess that's the pros and cons of being on a state highway. There's great access in terms of the south side because of the state highway, but it makes it much more expensive to develop because it's on the state highway. I guess the only question I would have is, in terms of accessing the western portion of the county, what kind of pressure would the south side put on Airport Road? That's the most immediate county road that would be impacted.
Okay. Well, we can certainly present this information on 1013. I'm not hearing a leaning one way or another, either by choice or with the remaining sentiments. And we can certainly go into with the meeting without any direction. I just want to be clear that that's what I'm hearing right now is you would like to use that 1013 meeting to present the data, and you'll have your time, of course, each to talk about your thoughts on this, so that will dovetail nicely, but not to provide any consensus on direction.
I think that, as Commissioner Malone said, that this data alone, and I think Commissioner Wise alluded to this as well, indicates a leaning towards the west site. It's less expensive, and it provides better access for the sheriff's office. So I think that presenting this information would be very useful in and of itself, and then each of us can comment, just as we did today, on our perspectives. We'll see where we go. But we also need to be very clear that we do have a traffic study analysis that we're waiting for, and that's one more piece of information that will get added in to the mix.
Yeah, we do. I agree. I mean, again, I'm going to just reiterate what I believe and what I've said previously, that the challenges on 53rd Street are not going to be impacted by adjacent facilities. They're going to be so overshadowed by the Mary's annexation, and we know already that the impact of adjacent facilities is minimal, relative to the studies we've had on the north-south site. So I wouldn't expect that to change the reality of the 53rd Street challenges that exist already. But I think where Commissioners, I'm struggling is, I'm responsible for managing the Justice System Improvement Program. The Justice System Improvement Program has bookends, it has limits. And, I will say that while I acknowledge and I understand and appreciate the comment about, long-term strategic growth potential, that really was not one of the objectives of JSIP. And so, as we stand up at this final meeting, I'm a little bit nervous about the introduction of that in our criteria or formally stating it. I don't know how to incorporate that now. I'm struggling with that.
Nick, it's already there. I'm not saying anything that's not already in the criteria, in terms of the potential expansion for uses other than JSIP and that node for potential. So it's, does that outweigh the other factors? No, not based on our current weighting. But when I ran for office, I said that I was always going to think about the long term as well as the short term. And so I personally feel like I need to take into account those long-term elements. You know, and are we missing any opportunities by choosing one rather than the other just because we're thinking about the short term? And that's my role.
I understand. I do. Do you feel like that item should be weighted differently? I mean, or do all the, I'm asking all the commissioners, do you feel that should be weighted differently? It has a 1 rating right now.
I like what you have right now. I think it can just be up to us commissioners to, you know, mold that around in our heads and you know, make those determinations ourselves, and we will have the opportunity to, you know, talk to people and tell them what we're thinking and why. Nick, I think you're doing a great job. I think, you know, your role as staff, you're staying in your lane, you're doing great, you're presenting this. The commissioner's lane is really to, you know, make the decision and talk to the public and have our kind of our own process that I would say piggybacks off of the process that you've laid out. And I hope that that is helpful to you and not like stressing you out.
No,
I really think you're doing a good job.
It is helpful. I just want to make sure that I am understanding what you're sharing and asking for, and that you know, what we present on 1013 is true, and we have alignment, and so no surprises. So it is helpful. Thank you. Both your comments were helpful. Joe, Pat?
Actually, I just wanted to ask the commissioners if there is additional information that you are needing from staff. We've been focused a lot on the public engagement piece, and as we've discussed here today, that key public meeting is coming up the middle of next week. But when we look at the trajectory of the project over the course of the next really 5 weeks, I think our absolute D-Day, commissioners, right now is November 16th, and that particular D-Day is we're going to be requiring the board to make a decision on or before that date and no later than that date. Otherwise, we potentially jeopardize one or more of our letters of intent that we currently have in place for both the south site and the west site. So if there is additional information that you need for staff to prepare for you to help with your deliberations, that's really important for us to know. At this point, if there's something that we haven't gotten to you that is important to you, and I certainly understand you're wanting to know more about what comes out of next week's public engagement meeting, but what else is there that you would like to know or have access to that we as staff can make sure we're providing?
Well, I am good with the information that staff has presented at this time. I mean, if something pops up that staff obviously thinks that we should know about, then that's great. What I am thinking about in my head is how not everyone, not all members of the public are as good at testifying and providing their input and outreach as everyone else. Some people are good at it, some people are not, some people have limited access to that sort of thing. So my attention is focused on those people who maybe have not had a chance to weigh in yet, and what that looks like, and if those are going to be popping up. So that's what I'm looking for. And just, you know, a note about D-Day, I will absolutely be able to make the decision when the time comes. You know, that's our job. That's my job, and it's not my first rodeo. It's like my 50th rodeo. So thank you.
Pat, I think you had something you wanted to share.
Yeah, I'm fine with answering Joe's question. I think we have a good amount of information. Going back to your question, Nick, of the scorecard, I'm I guess it was weighting, changing the weighting on the node anchor tenant, and I'm fine with the current weighting, and partly if they were tied, if the two sides were about even, then maybe I can get into the weeds a little bit more. But with you could weight it more, and it still wouldn't change the differential. So I'm fine with going forward with this scorecard.
Thank you.
I do have one other element that I've been nagging at me, and that is we've looked at the wetlands as a cost, and a cost only so far. And I know early on in the process we also talked about environmental amenity and waterways and wetlands as an opportunity. And on both sites, there's opportunity for additional environmental conservation or investment and contribution to the well-being of our water quality and aquatic habitat. It's not a major factor in terms of choosing between the two sites, but we don't have any kind of comparison there. And I was just approached by a colleague from the Marys River Watershed Council who would like to talk to us about the relative, improvement potential of from an environmental perspective. So Nick, I would like to put you in touch with her to have that discussion, just so we have that information.
Okay, I can do that. And I don't know if when we did our wetland delineation order, Turnstone paid any attention to the quality of wetlands, which I think may speak to your concern a little bit.
It's more about, we can have that discussion later, but there's an opportunity, and I think that it's probably not just, it's the habitat value as well. And what are the habitat values and for what? And so it's, let's have that discussion with the Marys River Watershed Council folks and others if they also want to be engaged. But again, as I say, it's one of those factors that might be a marginal factor, but I think we should have that information in the next couple of weeks as we move forward, rather than not have it, so that we can say we've looked at all of the attributes. So
sure.
I'll talk to you about it afterwards.
Okay. I do want to expand or embellish on Joe's comments about November 16th and make sure that there's no confusion. We still need to make our site selection decision effectively on 10/19. We could maybe push that a little bit later, but the November 16th date is the day at which a purchase sale agreement has to be signed, approved and signed. So Vance is on this call, and of course he knows well there's a lot of work between once we've made the site selection and actually getting the PSA drafted and approved. So just want to be clear on that there's sort of two different milestones here.
I also point out that is during the Association of Oregon Counties annual meeting. So we have to decide also whether we are going to hold our board meeting that day or not, or some abbreviated meeting, because traditionally we have not.
Mitch, do you have anything else to add before we go today?
No, nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, with that, if there aren't additional questions or comments, I'll return it to Chairperson Odero. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the additional information and Mitch's presence and support. And yes, we all knew it wasn't going to be easy. So more discussion to come. Okay. I'm moving onward. The next, we are now moving into our business meeting. Does anyone need a 5-minute break, or are we ready to proceed? Proceed. Okay. First item of business is the consent calendar.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor, please signify with an aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Onwards to old business, the second reading of amendment to the Benton County Code, Chapter 39 for the transient lodging tax, to bring it in accord with process. Vance.
Pretty straightforward. You've done this numerous times. You're now at the second reading of an ordinance. Following the second reading, this becomes effective 30 days from today. I don't think I need to say any more without literally beating a dead horse.
Okay.
Do you have a horse over there, though? You said literally. No, never mind.
Stop. Just stop. Figuratively.
Do I have a motion?
It's a pony. I will move to enact ordinance number 2021-0306, amending BCC Chapter 39 and conduct a second reading of the ordinance.
Second.
All in favor, please signify with an aye.
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 You want me to read it? All right. Before the Board of Commissioners for the State of Oregon for the County of Benton in the matter of amending Benton County Code Chapter 39 to authorize the Department of Revenue to collect tax, ordinance number 2021-0306. It never fails. Did you guys hear the sirens? Oh, yeah. Benton County Board of Commissioners hereby ordain as follows. Now therefore the Benton County Board of Commissioners ordain as follows. Part 1 short title. This ordinance shall be known as Amendment to Benton County Code Chapter 39, Transient Lodging Tax. The effective date will be November 5, 2021, and I think that wraps up this amendment to the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, look forward to seeing how that arrangement works, working with the state to do the collections. Okay, on to item.
What's the effective date of the state taking over from the city the collection?
I believe that they were taking over Friday, this past Friday. But Mary, is that right?
No. The city was able to get their agreement with the state finalized, so the state will be collecting the city's taxes. However, the city and the county have reached an agreement that they will collect our taxes through December right now. And hopefully we'll have our agreement with the state done by then. So it is a little confusing for the taxpayers in that they will be submitting their payment to the city of Corvallis for the county, but to the state for our websites direct in those directions, and I think it will all work out in the long run, but it is kind of confusing right now this quarter.
Okay. We will sort it all out. Moving on to new business and item 7.1, we will be addressing the request from Corvallis Housing First to provide $75,000 to complete renovations of the 3rd Street Commons, the turnkey project. And we have with us Andrea Myrie this morning to address that, as well as Joe.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing us to bring this topic back to you. Andrea will be doing most of the talking this morning. Attached to the agenda item was a formal request from Corvallis Housing First. They approached our staff, county and city staff, probably about a month ago and inquired as to whether or not the city and or county would be able to help assist with bringing the 3rd Street Commons project to completion relative to the renovations. I did bring that request forward to the board about 2 weeks ago, and the board decided that you would like to have more information and hear directly from Andrea. So she's joining us today to talk more about her request, and hopefully we can get feedback from the board today one way or another if you plan to assist with this request. So Andrea, with that being said, I'll ask you to jump in.
Great, thank you so much for having me today. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to ask for some assistance with this really big project that was rather a surprise to us that we had this opportunity, and we're really excited to be able to house people at 3rd Street Commons, which was formerly the Budget Inn. But we've had some success, but we've also had a few challenges, which you'll hear about both this morning. So in the information that I submitted to Joe, and actually I'm not sure if I can screen share part of it, it just might be helpful. I'm not sure if I have that ability though. Okay, great, thanks. Oh, wrong thing here. All right, can you see there's a list of items here? I'm not, oh, nope, hang on a second. Hang on, I'm not sure if this is gonna work actually, because I can't scroll down. Hang on. Here we go. The information in the packet, so I'll start from the beginning. So we, back in the late fall of 2020, we found out about a funding opportunity to purchase a motel in Corvallis through Project Turnkey. Commissioner Zan was a big part of that, of us finding out about this opportunity. We had long been looking at the Budget Inn in Southtown as a potential site for shelter and housing for people experiencing homelessness in our community. It was just our organization. We've had talks with other organizations saying, that would be an intriguing place to provide services, because there's not a lot of private residents around the property. It's in close proximity to resources located in downtown, but not in downtown. It's on a bus route, on a transportation route that would be, make it possible for people to walk or to take the bus to other places where they need services. And so Project Turnkey funding came available through the state legislature and through Oregon Community Foundation. We had a crew of board members who approached the property owners to see if they were interested in selling. They decided that they were. And then we pursued purchasing the property. And so within a couple of months, we were proud owners of a former motel, the Budget Inn. So in that process, we did do due diligence with Oregon Community Foundation doing a property inspection, and we did our own property inspection of the facility, which indicated several things that needed to be fixed. So some of those things were listed in the packet that I gave you, and a lot of this story is outlined in the information in the packet as well. So some of the things, and they gave us a range of items, and of course, just like you purchase any other property, instead of the bank sort of requiring these repairs, the Oregon Community Foundation was requiring these repairs to be made after purchasing the property, based on the inspection that they did, gave an estimate of what those items would be that would be required to be repaired, as well as a range of costs. So this list that I've included kind of covers what that original list of items was and the range of costs. So you can see here they were estimating, the low cost of about $70,000 or $80,000 and a high cost of about $120,000. So because there were some repair costs associated with the project, they also provided $100,000 in support to help pay for some of those expenses. And so we started in on the project. So we initially started with replacing the siding on the south building, and soon ran into some major issues with the building. So because during the inspection process, both with the inspection that we had ordered and the inspection that Oregon Community Foundation had ordered, there was not the ability of the inspectors to go underneath the south building, because there's not really a crawl space. There wasn't any sort of entryway to examine the condition of the flooring of the south building and some of the other issues. And so once the contractors came in to start tearing off siding, we quickly discovered that there was a ton of dry rot in the building, and especially along the sides of the building and the floor joists. So you can see from the pictures that I included in the packet what some of these problems were, and what some of the remedies were to the problem, which included replacing the sills, re-pouring some of the sills, replacing the floor joists, which also meant, because the bathrooms were mostly located in the rear of the rear of the building, replacing the flooring, the plumbing, the shower surrounds, because a lot of the shower surrounds were in okay shape, but not something that we could reuse, so required the replacement of those shower surrounds. And this was the case in several of the units in the south building. And as you may or may not know, right now the cost of materials is tremendously high, hard to get materials, tremendously high cost, and construction costs have just gone up quite a bit over the last year or two. And the other thing that wasn't anticipated was the cost of hiring a general contractor. So, we have some experience doing some renovations of properties since we own 3 other locations. It quickly became apparent, because of the extensive nature of the repairs that needed to be made, that it wasn't something that we could manage ourselves, that we had to hire a general contractor, which automatically added about 20% to the final bill for the project. So anyway, we went forward and made the repairs that were required. Some of these things, like I said, included replacing sills, dry rot, bathrooms, and then other things that were unanticipated were some extensive electrical work, because a lot of the electrical work had been done by the owner, and to the best of his ability, and other contractors over the years wasn't quite up to code and safety standards. We want to make sure that we're actually keeping people safe in housing and in shelter. And we also made some improvements to the north building that we didn't anticipate, because, and if you've ever driven by the motel, the north building is kind of elevated. So the south building is kind of an L-shaped building. The north building is a little bit elevated. And we had an offer from the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition to put solar panels on this building, which, considering most of the utilities on the property are electric, huge resource for us to be able to, to use solar power to power some of the HVAC units in the rooms and whatnot. So we made improvements to the electrical service, replaced the roof, and frankly, we would have had to upgrade the electrical service to that building anyway, given the the amount of use that that the building is experiencing right now, being full of people all the time. So in the budget explanation, we've done, I think, a pretty good job of bringing in some significant resources into our community from both the state and the Fed. So when we participated in Project Turnkey, we were awarded funding for the purchase of the property, which was about, and it's hard for me to see my own screen here, but I think you can see the budget, was about $2.4 million, in addition to some funding for addressing repairs at the property. We were also at the same time able to attract quite a lot of funding through the emergency services grant process, which is federal funding that came to the state of Oregon to help support emergency services for people experiencing homelessness. So all told, you know, we were able to raise a few $1 million in support for homelessness and supporting people that were experiencing homelessness in the community. However, this did mean this was quite a big risk to our organization, and we've had some, as all organizations, nonprofits should, had reserve funds that we ended up accessing the cost. So you can see the highlighted line there of how much we put in of our own funding towards the project. And then at the end here, you can see how much the repairs ended up costing the organization. Anyway, I'm going to end there if you have questions, because I don't know how much time I have, but and I'm actually going to stop screen sharing, because if you have it in your packet, you can look there.
Okay, thank you, Andrea, for that excellent background and summary. And then why don't you summarize the request to us as well?
So I'm basically asking the county to help us with $75,000 of to help make up for some of the unanticipated capital costs that we had associated with opening 3rd Street Commons.
Okay, questions from my fellow commissioners?
Commissioners, before you jump into possibly making a formal decision, I would ask Mary to join us for a moment and identify where on the spreadsheet that you saw earlier today that this money would be coming from if the board were to award it.
Yeah, it was in the column under discretionary funds right now. It could possibly be ARPA funds, but right now it was in the discretionary fund column, $75,000.
Thank you. That was good to verify. Anyway, thank you.
Discretionary meaning that it's some of the funds that we have been defederalized in a sense.
Yeah, lost.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Well, I certainly support this project and happy to help make it possible to continue to house folks that are currently unhoused and to provide quarantine and isolation for anyone that's COVID positive. Really appreciate the fact that you're doing that. Do I hear a motion from either of my fellow commissioners if there are no questions? Nancy.
I don't really have a question, but I'll just make a couple comments. First, Andrea, thank you for coming and explaining all of that to us. It makes a big difference. And thank you for the tour that you gave me a couple months ago. It was very eye-opening. Those pictures really don't do it justice. If you saw it in real life with huge gaping holes in the floor that you can see outside, I mean, it was crazy. So I'll just say that, you know, on the one hand, I don't want people to think that, you know, you can just come to the county and ask for money and we'll just throw money at you, you know. On the other hand, this project is not just any project. This is a huge deal. It has huge community support. It has broad and varied funding support throughout the community. It's something that I think is amazing, and I think it is worth us supporting. So I will be in favor of supporting it at the full $75,000.
Great project, and I appreciate the background information, and I've done enough repairs to know once you take that first board off, you can find some real interesting things. But so this isn't surprising at all, especially that it was the budget in, and maybe they weren't keeping up on repairs. But I thought we had a partner in the city on this project. It's been at least a week ago, and Mark Shepard, I guess through you, Joe, sent us a long email saying what the city is currently doing, and that they're not able to partner on this $75,000 ask. I guess, Joe, do you have any further information, insight on the city's role?
Commissioner, thank you for the question. Yes, when I posed the question to Mark Shepard, Mark indicated that he didn't feel that they were in a position to assist financially currently. I had proposed the idea of us both using a portion of our ARPA dollars and splitting the request, and each one of us paying a 50% share. Mark indicated that the city wasn't at a point where they were able to evaluate their ARPA dollars, and that there's a possibility that the city may be willing to contribute at a future date towards this particular project once they decided on their ARPA funding, but he felt at this point it was not something that the city was able to do. At the same time, he also underscored the amount of money that the city does provide to local nonprofits in the area through their regular budget process.
Okay, do you have something to add?
I was just going to say we are planning to approach the city for assistance in pre-development. So as you may know, this site has attached to it, we believe anyway, $5 million from the state confirmed, and then $3 million from the feds. That's still pending with the infrastructure bill for developing the site further for permanent supportive housing, so adding more units to the site. I will be approaching the city for some help with pre-development costs, and hoping that we'll get a positive response from them for that.
Well, I think definitely in support of this effort, especially as far along as it is, that between Reverend Butler's request this morning and Hope Priorities number 6 that was put as the top priority, that this just makes sense to finish this portion of the project. So if you're ready for a motion, I would be glad to do that.
Please.
I'll move to approve $75,000 contribution to Corvallis Housing First for the purpose of repairs and renovation to the 3rd Street Commons.
Second.
All in favor, please signify with an aye.
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 Aye. And thank you, Andrea, for all you and Corvallis Housing First are doing. I'm very excited to hear about the next phase of potential development on the site. so that we can address even more needs here in the community.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you all. Okay, next up we have Captain Carly, who will be, oops, I think I'm getting some feedback for that. Justin, if you might want to turn your mic off for a moment. Thank you. So we have a discussion and a decision to approve the 21-23 Community Corrections Plan at IGA between us and the state of Oregon. And I think for a while we've done these things fairly routinely, but we do have new commissioners, and not everyone understands the dynamics between the county and the state and how the community corrections budget works. So this is an opportunity to take a little bit of a deeper look and to get a sense for the decisions that need to be made on a regular basis by you and your team, Captain Carly. And I see that Abe is also here with us, Abe Griswold, and the Sheriff. So welcome.
Thank you. Let me just check in to make sure that you can hear me okay. Okay. I'm getting some normal feedback from our law enforcement building. So thank you, Commissioner, for having me. And yes, Abraham Griswold, one of our supervisors, is answer any questions that we might have, and then the Sheriff too. So I'm here today to present the 2021-2023 Community Corrections Plan. As you may know, we're required to submit a Community Corrections Plan to the Department of Corrections, including our program descriptions and our budget summary. And the Oregon Department of Corrections also requires counties to enter into an intergovernmental agreement to receive grant and aid funds for our Community Corrections program. So today what I want to do is I want to touch briefly on 4 areas. I want to talk about our Community Corrections budget, our staff, who I'm a big fan of, our office workload, and our programs. And I also want to answer any questions that the group may have. So first, just a quick rundown on the Community Corrections budget. So this biennium, the legislature approved the statewide Community Corrections budget at $284 million. And Benton County's allocation percentage for 21-23 is 1.06% of that $284 million, which is about $3 million. And to get to that statewide $284 million, it was a combination of a baseline budget of $234 million and 3 POP packages that totaled just under $50 million from the legislative session. So the POP packages included a personal services inflation of $32 million. It included a supervision fee enhancement package of $10 million. And it included a designated misdemeanors package of about $7 million. And so again, the combination of that baseline budget and those POP packages is what got us to the $284 million. So I've presented community corrections plans to the board since about 2009, I believe. And it just seems to be increasingly more and more dynamic and, I guess, creative each legislative session in terms of statewide community corrections budget and sustainable funding. And so that's a quick picture of kind of how we get to the statewide community corrections and what our community corrections allocation is. So next, I want to give a quick rundown on our parole and probation staff. So in parole and probation, we have 13.3 FTE. We have a leadership team, which includes myself, Abraham Griswold and Joel Pickard, both are sergeants, and they have both been with the Sheriff's Office since 2001. Very talented, very skilled, very knowledgeable. We have 7 parole and probation officers. We have Josh Hall and Susan Sowers. Both have been with us since 2001 as well. Cody Smith has been with us since 07. Ryan Roth has been with us since 08. Josh Pritt has been with us since 2013. Shauna Johnson has been with us since 2014. And our newest member to our team is Madeline Edmonds. She's been with us since 2020. That group as well is very talented, very knowledgeable, and has a great blend of experience. We also have 2 administrative specialists with our staff. We have Summer Smallwood. She's been with us since 2017. And we have Caitlin Lilly. She's been with us since 2020. We also have a case monitor position, which is 1.3 FTE. And what that is it is a combination of about 4 or 5 part-time, temporary, paid student interns. And so this is a program where we partner with local colleges, and we provide a professional work environment and a cooperative work experience for students in our area that are trying to figure out what they're doing, and we just want to put them in front of a professional setting, and at the same time they're continuing with their schooling. And so it's been a very, very successful program over the years. So I'm very proud of the work that our parole and probation staff do each and every day. These folks are high caliber, they're strong character, they're experienced, they're knowledgeable, their empathy, their creativity, their resourcefulness, their professionalism. The work that they do with folks who come through our door every day, it often goes unnoticed, it often goes under the radar, but I recognize it, I know its value, and I appreciate all of them. And I believe that Benton County is fortunate to have them as part of the team. So. Next, I want to talk a little bit about our office workload and how we prioritize. So, Community Corrections in the state of Oregon is responsible for the supervision of convicted adult justice-involved individuals whom the courts and the parole board have placed in our community. And one of our main goals is to help people address the issues that cause them to enter into and to be involved in the criminal justice system and ultimately leave the criminal justice system. In terms of workload distribution in our programs, we continue to prioritize our most valuable resources on the highest risk population. And when I say highest risk, I don't mean somebody in crisis. I mean the risk to reoffend. And that's how we make decisions about personnel, caseload assignments, programming, referrals, field time, subsidy reentry dollars, UAs, etc. And we make consistent efforts to pay attention to the research and the best practices within our profession. So another important aspect is understanding the evidence-based principle of risk, need, and responsivity. And that begins with utilizing validated risk assessments. And the results of those risk assessments, that directs our supervision strategies, how we prioritize our resources, and how we organize our overall office caseload, whether it be caseload assignments, developing comprehensive case plans, making effective use of referrals, interventions, jail space, or being actively involved in reentry efforts with Department of Correction releases. Another important piece about the validated risk assessments and using those is it helps to ensure that we do not overexpose low-risk clients to the criminal justice system. So as we are assessing where they go up and down in terms of risk, it's at both ends of the spectrum. So next, I want to just briefly talk about our programs. So at the end of August 2021, our total caseload count was 303. And that's 253 felony cases and 50 misdemeanor cases. And if you tracked any of the trending of folks that are on supervision in the state of Oregon, we are trending with the rest of the state, where it is getting less and less and less in terms of overall caseload size. Our community corrections plan outlines our caseloads and our programs, and I just want to run through them real quickly. We have medium and high risk level caseloads. We have a low limited risk level caseload. We have a transition program, which is specifically designated to focus on prison releases, re-entry, and wraparound services. We have our drug treatment court caseload. We have a sex offender supervision program that includes a contracted treatment provider and a contracted polygraph examiner. We have our work crew program, and we also have our transition center, which provides structured, clean and sober, stable housing, oftentimes for folks that have a difficult time otherwise being placed in other housing resources in the community. And again, these caseloads and these programs go back to how we prioritize our resources, focusing on that highest risk population and utilizing those risk assessments. So in Benton County and statewide, our office has continued to be forward-thinking as a profession in terms of adhering to evidence-based practices, using the validated risk assessments, developing comprehensive case plans, effective use of referrals in the community. We're heavily involved with the re-entry efforts with reach-ins with the Department of Corrections through our transition program, and we don't over-supervise low-risk clients, and we continue to focus our resources on supervising that highest risk population. So that's a little bit about our community corrections budget, our staff, our office workload, and our programs. And I'm torn on how deep of a dive to take into the weeds on some of these topics. I'd be more than happy to go a little bit deeper on some of these. And I've got Abraham as well, or maybe there's a future time where we can sit down and maybe take a deeper dive into some of these issues. For example, the battery of risk assessments that we have. I didn't want to go too deep into the weeds here, but I'd be more than happy to share additional information if that was something that interested folks. But to say that the last biennium has been very challenging, it's an understatement. And I expect this one to be no different. Actually, our AV is no different, starting off into this biennium. So, and it really is, for me, just a credit to our staff and the excellent work that they did last biennium, and then they just continue to do every day. So, and that's how I expect us to meet those challenges. So.
I would like to thank you. I really appreciate the overall description and presentation of your department and your team. And I do expect there might be a couple of questions from my fellow commissioners. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things, and that is that I know that there is a working group right now working on rethinking how community corrections is being funded in the state, because this approach that's based on caseload is definitely not ideal, especially at a time when, with justice reinvestment, we're focusing on reducing the prison population, and that automatically means that we have fewer people that are incarcerated, and yet we know that parole and probation plays such a critical role in helping people transition out of prison, and we can foresee a bigger role, with our local jail population as well. So and trying to communicate that to the legislature has been challenging. So that's one piece. And then the other very big complicating factor, of course, is Measure 110, and the fact that we have just defelonized several offenses. And so we have the same people with the same challenges and issues, but we can't any longer serve them the way that we did serve them because of the way that they come through the system. And I know that's part of the reason for that policy option package with an extra $10 million, but that doesn't go very far spread around the state. So all I'm trying to say is that I think that there's hope moving forward to make this easier, but right now I do believe community corrections across the state, not only here, is in a jam because of all these shifting pressures and old funding paradigms. So I appreciate your work to try and keep it all together.
Thank you.
I do have a budgetary question in a moment, but I want to make sure that I give time to my fellow commissioners to ask any questions.
Justin, I appreciate the background information, and like you suggested, at a later date, maybe go into a little more detail, but I appreciate the length of service that your crew has exhibited, and that's impressive. Just to have continuity and a consistent approach, I think, is probably essential for this effort. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you for coming. And is it Captain? Is that the correct title? Captain Carly, thank you. I think that was definitely a deep enough for me today, but I am always interested in learning more. So if we have an opportunity at a later date for, going deeper, that'd be great. The staff report was very complete, so thank you. I appreciate that. And please pass along my thanks to all of your staff and your crew.
Okay, thank you. And I think in the future what I'd like to do is maybe hijack a meeting with the sheriff that the Board of Commissioners has and maybe find my way into one of those. So I'll talk with him.
I think that's a great idea. My deeper dive question in terms of budgets was just the difference between the budget as presented on page 162. The total is $5.655 million and $750,000, and the IGA budget that is about $530,000 less, $5,124,645, and why the difference? I did not read into the weeds of the narrative far enough to get that answer, but that caught my eye.
So I do know that I don't know if Dawn Dale is still on here or not, but I do know that I just sent her an updated streaming fund that we received. It was called a transition fund, and it ultimately replaced a inmate welfare fund that had been in previous bienniums. So I guess I'd have to just take a deeper dive into the budget piece, but I can work with Dawn Dale to make sure that everything is where it needs to be in terms of the numbers.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I could see that there was some change, and I just couldn't quite figure it out, especially since I was having a hard time putting the two budgets next to each other from the packet. Okay, I have no further questions. I just appreciate all the work you and your team do.
Thank you.
Are you ready for a motion? I'll move to approve the 2021 through 2023 Community Corrections Plan and Intergovernmental Agreement number 6152 between the State of Oregon and Benton County.
Second.
All in favor, please signify with an aye.
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 Aye. Oh, here's Dawn. she may have another answer for us.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was trying to talk and you guys couldn't hear me. So just to let you know that when the budget was put together, we did not have the final numbers. And so I currently now have the final numbers. And so there were some differences under the Justice Reinvestment Grant and some differences under the CPA plan and also some differences in our beginning balance. So I do show that we have $287,385 when I put all of those together that are more than what we budgeted for. So my estimate is that those extra dollars will probably, we don't need it to balance that budget, but it will probably go into a contingency fund that would be a rollover in the next biennium.
Okay, so I was looking at it the other way. It looked like the IGA actually had less money than the budget, but you're saying that we actually have more money coming in?
Yeah, we ended up actually ending up with more funds in the CCA plan and a few dollars less in the Justice Reinvestment Grant. Other than the fact that we are waiting for that final approval, but that's where the estimate, where the numbers fall. And unfortunately, we don't get those numbers until way after the budget. So this is a juggling act that we do every biennium as to what are we going to get versus we do best guesses. So.
Yep, got it. I understand.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Dawn.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, thank you all. We'll look forward to hearing more about community corrections and our local programs at a future date.
Good, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Captain Carly. Okay, moving on to item 7.3, a discussion and decision approving a salary adjustment to non-rep salary schedule. Tracy Martineau.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Let's see, I have Tammy Webb, our Senior HR Analyst who oversees our compensation and classification program here with me today, and I'd just like to invite Tammy to chime in wherever she would like to contribute. She actually does all the heavy lifting behind the research for making this recommendation today and coordinates the process. So we're here today to ask for your approval to make an adjustment to the non-rep salary ranges based on the employment cost index, which is the index that we use to maintain our position with respect to the market. And for the last 12-month period, which ended on June 30th, 2021, the increase in that index was 2.9%. And so the recommendation before you is to adjust the salary ranges for non-reps by the 2.9% increment. Just as a reminder, this adjustment would adjust only the salary ranges. It does not affect the individuals on these salary ranges, with the exception of anyone who might currently be at the minimum point of the range. With the adjustment, if they should fall below the new minimum, they would be adjusted up to the new minimum. So happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions?
Commissioner Malone?
Commissioner Malone.
Yeah. Tracy, would you kind of give the background on employment cost index? I remember some discussion, well, the CPI isn't as accurate, or so just a little background information why you're using that metric.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you for that question. So CPI is a familiar term, and the Consumer Price Index is an index that tracks the cost of a market basket. So that tends to be grocery items that a typical family would normally purchase throughout the course of a year. The Employment Cost Index tracks the price of labor. And this is based on data submitted to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which tracks this information nationally from all employers. And this enables us to really make a closer connection to what is happening in the labor market versus what is happening to a market basket.
Great, thank you.
I guess one further question, Tracy. We've also discussed the potential to move away from the performance management system, and once we do that, then this whole approach will shift and change, correct?
Not necessarily. I would expect that we would still want to maintain our position to the market, and I still believe this would be a good index for us to use. However, how we go about with salary progression on these ranges, that's what would really change.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. And I also know that we do a deeper dive periodically on specific roles and categories, because ECI is, by its very nature, an index which averages out the changes. So there may be some professions where we're really lagging market, and others where we're on target. But those really tend to come in more in the context of labor negotiations, correct?
I would say yes, to some extent. I would say another mechanism that we use to really true up, the jobs that we anchor our salary ranges to is done when we do what we call market studies or job studies, and we're hoping to do a market study in year 2 of the biennium.
Excellent. I think that given all the changes over this pandemic period, it's time to do that again. Joe?
Commissioner, I just wanted to clarify, if I heard you correctly, you referred to the performance management system and going away from that. I think what you may have meant was the pay for performance component of our performance management system, because there is a difference. We are considering going away from the pay for performance piece for non-reps, but we are sticking with a performance management system.
Thank you for that correction. I appreciate that nuance and misspoke. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I would be happy to take a motion if you are ready.
I'm ready. I'll move to approve a 2.9% adjustment to the non-representative employee salary schedule ranges effective July 1, 2021.
Second.
All in favor, please signify with an aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Thank you, Tracy and Tammy.
Thank you, Commissioners.
At this point in time, we are on to other. And as you know, we have 2 executive sessions. We are going to switch the order of those and hear from Nick Berg on real estate matters first, and then move into the executive session for labor negotiations. So with that, we'll be taking a 5-minute break in order to allow time to clear the room at the Board of Commissioners end, and we'll be back at 12:30.
This conference is no longer